Okay, so here are the answers to this week's 1966 music quiz. See how many got right out of 50. Do let me know afterwards how you did. Okay, start with the trivia. The biggest selling single of the year in the UK? You know, it's the most surprising one there. It is Distant Drums by Jim Reeves. Huge selling. I always think, in a year that was often thought of as one of the best for music, isn't it amazing that the biggest selling song was that? And it was by quite a distance, I think. Strangers in the Night, I believe, was the second biggest selling one of the time. Now, if you're interested in the albums that any of those go with, apart from Jim Reeves, which I don't believe there seemed to be an album. I mean, Jim Reeves mostly churned out devotional, Christian albums, didn't he? But one of the Tom Jones ones here doesn't have Green Green Grass of Home on the album that came out on. Didn't come out until the following year, 67. But Atomic Jones certainly is worth it's always worth listening to Tom, isn't it? I mean, what a voice. Even if you don't like the songs, you can just marvel at that. Yellow Submarine, of course, comes from Revolver, which I think I'm pretty sure most people will be listening to anyway. And Strangers in the Night comes from Strangers in the Night. We're still in Frank Sinatra's heyday here, really. If you're a Frank fan, you're going to love that. But what was the biggest selling album of 66? Well, it's a slight trick question because, a lot of people think, well, was it Revolver? Was it Pet Sounds? Was it Blonde on Blonde? No, it was actually the same as the best-selling album of 65. Exactly the same. It was the Sound of Music soundtrack. It's not even a 66 album, but it just kept going on and on and on. The Sound of Music soundtrack. So the legendary, probably the greatest known unreleased album ever produced, or ever not produced, I would say, was of course Smile. It's never come out. A few years later there was a Smiley Smile, I believe was the name of it, a very, very light version of a few of the songs from the sessions. There's some things about the Smile sessions that have come out at times, but a lot of the stuff has not been released at all. Even when Brian Wilson released Brian Smile back as late as 2004, it was only him re-recording that stuff and producing his own versions. It was such a troubled thing, never seen the light of day as an album. Number 4, well, if you know my quizzes, you know I'm going to get him in wherever I can. And I've managed to in 66. Of course, the man who changed his name from Davy Jones, not to be confused with Davy Jones, the monkey, was David Bowie. And so the name David Bowie began in 1966. And what was significant about the US Billboard charts of the 23rd April this year, as you can see there, no UK artists in the American top 10. And what's amazing about that fact is that since the 18th of January 64, every single weekly chart had at least one UK artist in the American top 10. That's quite astounding, really, when you stop and think about it. Okay, name that album. Right, let's have a look. First one, Blonde on Blonde. Bit of Legally Blonde there at the end there, just to give a bit of a clue there. Sorry about the on. There's not very many ways you can represent that. But Blonde on Blonde, the wonderful, wonderful album, my favourite Bowie, my favourite Dylan album of the lot. Absolutely adore it. And probably my favourite of 66, I would think. Now, number 7, apologies if you don't know of this album. It is quite well known of its time. But it's the Monks with Black Monk Time. Bit of Jack Black here, you see. Black Monk Time. Worth a listen, certainly. And number 8, come on, you've surely recognised that. It's the Inside of Boots. Boots, the album of Nancy Sinatra, with These Boots Are Made for Walking, of course, and many others this year. A big seller and worth a listen. And then that leaves us these two. Well, I'm sure you recognise the old man from Up. And I know they're tights, but that's close enough to Uptight, isn't it? From Stevie Wonder for that year. And there's a pet being petted. And there's a symbol for BBC Sounds for Pet Sounds. Okay, that's the appearance for Pet Sounds in there. It doesn't need much plugging from me. Okay, and over to lyrics. Well, huge songs here. Let's take number 11 first. Every day is an endless stream of cigarettes and magazines, and each town looks the same to me. Shades of mediocrity. The next line, I think it is. Homeward Bound by the wonderful Simon and Garfunkel. Okay, off I'd say they're better of the two albums this year, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme. I Was Born with a Silver Spoon in My Mouth. Substitute by The Who, their album this year, although Substitute wasn't on it, was a quick one, which it's very early Who, isn't it? But it's at the end there's a kind of a mini rock opera beginning to show where their ideas were going. Number 13, when you were a young boy, did you have a puppy that always... Of course, that's River Deep Mountain High. And Ike Tina Turner released an album of the same name in '66. Number 14, if she is wrong, he can't see it. She could do no wrong. Turn his back on his best friend if he put her down. Like I said, I'll give you his best friend. If you just put that. That's obviously When a Man Loves a Woman, one of the great songs of the year by Percy Sledge. There is an album it's worth a listen despite that appalling cover. It's Percy's voice, if nothing else, is always worth a listen. But there's some great soul stuff on there as well. And finally, Loneliness is the Cloak You Wear, a deep shade of blue is always there. The sun ain't gonna shine anymore. Yeah, one of the big #1 hits of the year from Walker Brothers. Scott made an appearance. Another one that I'll always try and get in. Portrait is worth a listen. Worth a listen indeed. Okay, so 5 more albums there for you to get. How are you doing so far? I tell you, I reckon if you've got over half marks, you're doing superbly so far. Right, connections. I don't think this was that hard. I'm sure there's many of you out here that have got this, especially with me giving it away. I did ponder at one point not telling you who those were, but I thought that was unfair. So, of course, the Hollies, Buffalo Springfield, the Byrds, David Crosby, Stephen Stills and Graham Nash. Crosby, Stills and Nash. This is what they were doing in '66. And of course you can throw in Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young if you like, because of course Neil Young's there in Buffalo Springfield too. There's their albums of the year. Well, I say their albums. The Hollies, I think, released 3 albums in a year. But certainly Bus Stop is one of the ones that's best known from that year. Buffalo Springfield's debut album from that year with For What It's Worth opening it. And Fifth Dimension from the Byrds, a wonderful album. I really like that. Well worth a listen. Okay. What was the connection between these 4? Well, as you can see there, they recorded Hey Joe in '66. I know that was hard, but I did give you some help there. Told you, think of Jimi Hendrix, think of that year. And you may be aware of the Byrds version of Hey Joe on Fifth Dimension as well. But yes, Love also recorded Hey Joe. I don't think it's on either Love or Da Capo from that year. It's probably on editions you can find on Spotify now as an additional track. And the Surfaris did also record it. Hey Joe was one of those songs been knocking around. I think it was written in about 64, 65 by someone. And knocking around waiting for someone to make something of it. And then, of course, Jimmy blew it out of the water, didn't he? Slightly dodgy in the way of lyrics, I'd say. It's not exactly condemning domestic violence, is it? But what a song in Jimmy's version, definitely. And this connection. Well, these are 4 bands who were formed in '66. Now, I've got to apologise because I only realised afterwards that I never actually said in the end that's the Steve Miller Band. If you don't recognise them, and you may well not have done. But the Steve Miller Band were formed in '66, as were Slade, and so were the Bay City Rollers. It took them quite a long time to progress to any kind of stardom from there, didn't it? I assume it was a very different early lineup. And of course, the Monkees were first formed in '66, and the TV show started in '66 as well at the same time. Picture round. Let's have a look and see how many of these you got. Did you get Manfred Mann? Only really, the only way I would have got that is Paul Jones in the middle there. Remember his career as a VJ and as a presenter on what was that children's quiz, the film quiz that he presented? It wasn't Screen Test, was it? I don't think. Anyway, so his afterlife there. Number 20 was Gene Pitney, the wonderfully voiced Gene Pitney. What a powerhouse he was, who had several hits in '66. Always people say he looked like my dad back in then. Number 21, I'm sure you got. That was one of the Beach Boys. But did you get which one? It was Carl Wilson. Carl, okay. Yeah. 22 is Cream. That is Eric Clapton on the right. Doesn't look like him in the slightest, does it? But surely you recognise Ginger Rogers on the left there. 23, you can see the look of him already. That's a young Van Morrison when he's in Them. 24, the wonderful Petula Clark having a hit there. And 25, the silky voiced Dionne Warwick. So we're halfway through at this point. How well are you doing? Let's see if you did any better in the second round anyway. This album cover, I bet loads of people recognised it, but whether they remembered it was the psychedelic sounds of the 13th floor elevators. If you just got the 13th floor elevators, give yourself a half mark for that. 27, what was this? It was Face to Face by the Kinks. I think it's a very underrated Kinks album in a lot of cases here. I think it's a fantastic album, that one. 28, this is the Yardbirds and Roger the Engineer. I think Jimmy Page joined the Yardbirds that year. 29, the very, very famous cover of the Beatles, Yesterday and Today, which was almost immediately replaced as a cover. It was one of, I think it might even have been the last of the American-only albums where they were kind of catching up on the fact they started a bit late with the Beatles there. But they're obviously for the famous meat cover, bits of meat and bits of babies. Or what on earth they were thinking of, I have no idea. But it didn't last long. As I say, look at those faces. I don't think they're happy either. And the final one, Mothers of Invention, Freak Out. Yep, Frank Zappa's on his way. Okay, name that riff. How well did you do on this? Well, I suppose it depends on my playing. But then again, that's part of the joy of the round, isn't it? If I was good at playing, it would not be so fun. It's trying to decipher that riff from what I come up with. Well, number 31, surely you got Day Tripper. You must have got Day Tripper. Even with my playing of it, that was definitely the hardest one to play. 32, Paint It Black. Okay, that's that riff, that very kind of Indian riff, playing the sitar, isn't it, in the original? 33, of course, very basic, but I'm sure you got Wild Thing. You must have got Wild Thing. Anyway, 34 was Rainy Day Women, the opening of Blonde on Blonde. And 35 is the Kinks' Sunny Afternoon. Hope you at least got some of those. Make me feel a bit better if you did. Oh, this one I think was quite hard. Naming the artist. Okay, we started with the Pied Piper, didn't we? Crispian St. Peter. I think he actually had another hit in '66. He wasn't just a one-hit wonder, but Crispian St. Peter was the one who sang I'm the Pied Piper. Then Winchester Cathedral. That kind of slightly strange single there was the New Vaudeville Band. The New Vaudeville Band. What about Spanish Flea? It was Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. But I said you can have it if you just said Herb Alpert. Okay. Again, more cases there for that 66 isn't necessarily just the kind of music you remember. Guantanamera. Who came up? Who was the singer of Guantanamera? It was the Sandpipers. The Sandpipers. And finally, I thought I'd stick one in that I'm sure you'd remember. Summer in the City was, of course, the Lovin' Spoonful. And their album's certainly one to check out. I'm not sure about the rest of them up there. Okay, covers. The original artist who recorded this in '66, of course, Wild as the Wind was Nina Simone. And do listen to that album. It's quite wonderful. Okay, it's got a nice cover as well, her in her pose there, but it's a fabulous album. Really does stand out for me amongst a lot of the ones around there. Everybody's Talking by Nielsen was from Fred Neil's self-titled album. Really worth listening to. A very, very interesting album there. A Groovy Kind of Love was the Mindbenders. If you so wish to learn more about the Mindbenders, there's their self-titled album. And Phil's second appearance was with You Can't Hurry Love by the Supremes from another wonderful Supremes album, The Supremes A Go-Go. Cracking stuff. Diana Ross's voice on great form there. Really just an album of them performing various Motown hits that had been performed by others as well. So, but a fabulous album to listen to. Really cheer you up. And Mustang Sally was, of course, from Wilson Pickett. And that's that version is from The Wicked Pickett, one of his 2 albums of the year. Okay, we're near the end now. Let's see how we get on. Trivia. Yeah, I couldn't believe this was '66 as well. It was, of course, at Manchester Fair Trade Hall that Bob Dylan was called Judas. At Candlestick Park, the last song the Beatles ever played. Not an easy question. Is I'm a Beatles nut and I'm not necessarily sure I would have got it. You'd be tempted to go for rock and roll music, wouldn't you? But of course they open with that. There's no way they'd finish with Yesterday, unlike with Paperback Writer. Of course it is Long Tall Sally, which Paul McCartney always loved doing to get across his famous Little Richard impression. The odd one outs. Okay, now I said to you, these were, which one of these did not record a Bob Dylan cover in '66? And of course, it's a trick question because it was The Byrds. Fifth Dimension was the first album by The Byrds that did not have a Dylan cover on it. Their only album of the year, and it was the first one that did not have a Dylan cover on it. So there you go. Cher, I believe, saying I'm a Rolling Stone. Like a Rolling Stone on her album. I've not heard that. Her album Cher by Cher. Stevie Wonder on Uptight does a very interesting version of Blowing in the Wind. He was a good cover of other people's songs, wasn't he, Stevie? I mean, you know, his later We Can Work It Out is, for my mind, one of the best Beatles covers as well. And at the top, Them, who on their album Them Again, I think it's called, which was, I think, their second album produced, did a very, very well-known cover of It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. A terrific one as well from what's a very good album, Them Now. And on 49, the odd one out is Peter Tork. Why? Well, Harry Nilsson, Stephen Stills, and Paul Williams. Yes, I know I got his name wrong to begin with, but I got it right at the end. All auditioned for the Monkees. So did Peter Tork, but of course he was odd one out because he's the one who got in. All of the others auditioned for the Monkees. God, imagine Harry Nilsson in the Monkees. That would not have worked, would it? And a final Beatles question, of course, for everyone. Which wasn't a double A side? Eleanor Rigby, Paperback Writer, Yellow Submarine, Day Tripper. It was, of course, Paperback Writer. Eleanor Rigby and Yellow Submarine were, of course, paired together on an A side, and Day Tripper was a double A side with We Can Work It Out. But Paperback Writer sat on its own, even though, and here is where I would argue with you, Paperback Writer has probably the best B side, because it has Rain, the terrific Lennon kind of freak out song with a bit of backwards playing going on in there. I believe that's also probably Ringo's best song. He certainly gets to drum a little bit more in it, do something a bit more interesting. So there we go. So how did you do out of 50? Do please let me know. As I said, I haven't heard anyone getting 30 yet. I'm sure someone will have topped that with this year's. The answer's already been posted later today. I've put the wrong slide on the end there. It usually says see you next week. Please do, though, donate to my Just Giving page. There's the address. As I said on the original, it is why I do this. Please, 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 please. Even small amounts, they just build and build and build. If everybody who had taken part in this quiz had given just £1 since we started, we would be into about £300 by now. Okay? And just imagine if that was £2. So please donate something. So say, let me know how you got on @StuartHoskins. Spread the word, please, to others so we get more people having a go at this. And please subscribe so that you know when more quizzes are coming out. I'll be back with another one next Sunday. Hope you enjoyed it. Any feedback is always welcome. Have a good week.